Welcome to Lesson 9, Part A. We are going to talk about funding level assessment. In Lesson 8, we introduced the value at risk. We discussed there the Monte Carlo simulation as a tool intended to deliver the descriptive statistics which the VAR calculation relies on. Not just the VAR, but the expected shortfall as well. Here in Lesson 9, we have the Monte Carlo simulation too, but the difference from Lesson 8 is that here we consider the drawdown instead of the annual return. The drawdown with respect to the annual return offers a worst-case point of view because it measures negative partial returns across the whole year. That is compulsory to reckon the minimum funding level, as fund shortage might happen at any time, not just at the end of the year, due to annual negative return. That said, the process is the same as that adopted in Lesson 8. We extract the first sample, and then a second sample, and then a third sample, and so on up to 1,000 samples. We then calculate the maximum drawdown of each sample. With the descriptive statistics of the maximum drawdown of these 1,000 samples, we compute the expected shortfall. Let's have a look at the real-life example related to our four-system combination. We have a chance to compare the expected shortfall calculated so far to the historical estimate of the maximum drawdown, which reads 15% in this case. The expected shortfall is rather in line with the historical estimate, but it's usually bigger in absolute value, because the expected shortfall, calculated as explained here, offers a worst-case view. In fact, it reads 21%, 21.8 for the sake of precision. Let's recap. Thanks to the Monte Carlo simulation and by means of the expected shortfall, we get a worst-case estimate of the drawdown that we might incur. Well, in order to turn this estimate into a funding level assessment tool, we just need to add the margin requirement to this drawdown figure. The overall margin requirement, whose abbreviation is MR, is given by the overlap multiplied by the margin requirement on a single contract. Remind what the overlap is. The number of systems that might be on the market at the same time. If the average contract has a margin requirement of 4% and the maximum number of contracts negotiated at the same time is 3, then the overall margin requirement is 12%. 12% added to the expected shortfall of 21% is 33% as a result. The estimation of the funding level is inherently bound to the financial market involved, because the margin requirement of our contracts depends on that. If we go for the Globex, for instance, we have a margin requirement which ranges from 3%, namely for gold, to 6%, namely for the US stock index. As the gold contract is more frequently negotiated than the Standard & Poor by our system, a 4% margin requirement per contract is a fair estimate. That is where the 4% figure comes from with regards to the previous slide. Now, if we move to an ECN financial market, we go for a much smaller margin requirement. At last, even if we stick to the ECN financial markets, but we move from an EU-regulated market to a Swiss market, we have differences. The latter, in fact, offers smaller margin requirements, thus is more appealing. Resorting to underfunding is important, regardless of the extent to which the selected financial market allows us to do it. Underfunding makes us possible to have no opportunity costs, in that we can have our funds allocated on our 4-system combination and at the same time on an ETF. Of course, the amount of funds available for the alternative investment, such as the ETF above mentioned, is just 67%, meaning 100% minus 33%. Let's get into details about this chart. The underfunding level analysis chart. The x-axis here represents the funds provided measured as a percentage of the notional value that we intend to invest. So it goes from 0% to 100% to the right, which means no underfunding at all. The y-axis here instead reports the extent of the drawdown measured not with respect to the notional value, but with respect to the funds provided. It's easy here to figure out that with a 30% funding level, we wind up using up all our funds, because the red plot reads minus 100% on the y-axis when the funding level is 30%. Instead, with the 60% funding level, for instance, we will incur in a 55% consumption of our funds in the worst case. Remark that resorting to underfunding is also beneficial in terms of foreign exchange risk mitigation. But we are going to discuss that in the next video. Well, that's all for the time being. Thanks for watching, and see you at Lesson 9 Part B.